This video is brought to you by Skillshare.
Filming a wedding ceremony can be one of the more nerve-wracking experiences for a first-time wedding filmmaker. The ceremony is one of the most important moments at a wedding. I mean, this is the reason you're here. This is the reason that everyone is here. It's the moment that everyone has been anticipating and tirelessly planning and stressing over for months. So as a filmmaker and photographer, you really only have one opportunity to serve this moment in a beautiful way for your couple. So for today's video, I want to walk through how you can film a wedding ceremony even if you are a solo filmmaker, even if you're not and you have a second shooter. The tips I offer today can be utilized in your process so that you can have peace of mind with a proper plan and structure when you head into the wedding ceremony. What's up everyone, Jared with an I here. Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, this channel is all about giving you the confidence to lean into a full-time career as a wedding filmmaker. So if you are into that sort of thing, it would mean so much if you consider subscribing. But before we get into today's video, I want to talk about today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of online classes for anyone who loves learning and growing as a creative person. Skillshare is a great place to invest in yourself. With ad-free new premium classes launched each week, there's always something new to discover. For me, I am always looking for ways to invest in myself and my business. And for me, a big part of that is evolving and growing through education. Skillshare is a great way to learn from the best. People like Maddie Hapoya and Dan Mace. A lot of the folks on Skillshare are people that I have looked up to, admired, and even modeled my work after. Maddie Hapoya's wedding film class is one that really shaped and elevated my style as it is today. The first 1,000 people to use the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare so that you can start investing in yourself today. All right, first up, let's talk about the gear that you are going to need for this part of the day. As a solo filmmaker, I know it can be cumbersome worrying about all the different equipment that you might need for the ceremony. This is one part of the day where it's going to serve your couple best to be over-prepared with a bit of overkill in your camera bag. I personally recommend bringing 4 cameras, 3 tripods, 2 to even 3 recorders, but honestly 2 will suffice. Just the third one maybe as a backup solution. So even if you don't have all of this equipment, don't worry, there's still ways that you can implement the techniques that I'm gonna talk about in today's video, even if you have 2 cameras, 3 cameras, but I do recommend considering renting a 3rd or 4th camera for this part of the day especially. Because the last thing you want is to be kicking yourself in the editing room, wishing that you had an additional angle for the ceremony that you could cut to, just to add some extra flavor and dynamic to your edit. For your lens selection, I have 3 that I recommend. A 135mm for both bride and groom. You can also use an 85, or if you have the option, a 70 to 200mm. Since the ceremony is one of the more intimate moments of the day, having a tight close-up frame, like the groom's reaction, of the bride and groom as they read their vows, and of course the little moments in between for guest reaction will really go a long way and is a great way to highlight the intimacy of this moment. Along with the 135s, I also like to carry a 35mm or a 50mm for the aisle shot. So typically I like to run with the 50mm, and of course this does depend on the venue and the space that you are filming in. Sometimes you might be limited to a smaller space, so having a 35 would work well in that situation. But generally speaking, the 50mm is one that I am running all day, no matter what. For audio, honestly, I recommend the Tascam DR10Ls. These are amazing recorders that really pack a mighty punch when it comes to audio capture. And they really help me elevate my wedding films by giving me that professional sound at really just the click of a button. I mean, these things are super intuitive. I mean, they are really just automated to function where it's just plug and play, hit record, and you are good to go. And for me, that's another peace of mind that just allows me to create without worrying about it. Especially for the ceremony, having clear sound that the bride and groom and their family can watch back and be fully immersed without any distractions such as background noise or unwanted noise. Having clean, professional sounding audio is really going to elevate your end product. All right, so now that we've talked about some of the gear that you're going to need, let's talk about some practical tips that you can implement before the ceremony even happens so that you are well prepared, the photographer is well prepared, and everyone has a general idea of how everything is going to flow. This is especially important to do before the ceremony because you don't want to just be going in blind. The photographer doesn't want to go in blind either, not knowing what you're going to be doing. It's not going to go well if you don't communicate up front. So let's talk about some ways you can do this. So like with every how-to video, there's always a section in my videos about communication. And this is intentional because it is one of the most important things that you can ever do at a wedding in order to get everything that you need, in order to get those cinematic shots, in order to serve your couple well. It all starts and ends with proper communication. So really just asking them what their process is, talking through the game plan, and figuring out how you both can navigate this moment so that you get everything that you need. And so after you feel confident with the photographer's process and they feel confident with yours and everyone is on the same page, then I would recommend talking with the planner, the wedding day coordinator, whoever is in charge of navigating and making sure that everyone is in the right place where they're going to be entering. I would just communicate with her or him and ask, hey, so is there anything special happening, during the walk-in? Is there going to be a funny moment with a flower boy or flower girl or flower dog? Just asking if something unique is going to be happening that maybe you weren't made aware of prior to, because sometimes depending on the venue, the groom enters in somewhere completely different than the rest of the bridal party. So you want to be sure that you know where everyone's going to be entering and you know all the different elements that are going to be taking place during the ceremony. The ceremony is really like a choreographed dance. So if you don't know the choreography, when those curtains pull back, you're just kind of like a deer in headlights. You don't know what's going on and you're kind of left to just kind of figure it out as you go. And that's just going to cause more stress and anxiety, and that's where mistakes happen. When you are unprepared and you don't know what's going to be happening. So make sure that you are talking to all the vendors involved, and so that you can be well prepared for that moment. All right, so we've talked about the gear that you're going to need. We've talked with all the vendors involved. We've created a game plan with everyone, and now we are ready to get set up for the processional. So during the processional, this is obviously where, all the VIPs of the day, the family members, the bridal party, the bride and the groom all enter into the ceremony. So if I am filming this solo, this would be my typical setup. So I would be at the front of the aisle with the lead photographer, generally mirroring them so we are able to capture the same framing without interfering with one another. Again, this is based on a 3-camera to 4-camera setup. So my first camera, let's say camera A, this is going to be my groom reaction cam, and typically stationed on the left side of the ceremony. But you can also mimic this on the right as well if you have a backup ready to go. For this, you will want a long lens such as an 85 or a 135. A longer lens allows you to be further back to still capture the intimacy and raw emotion unfolding. The other reason is the compression and shallow depth of field that you are able to achieve with this lens. It really looks beautiful and adds so much character within your frame. So once the groom's cam is set up with the 135 on the left side, I usually move to the back of the ceremony for my safety angle with a 24 or a 35 mil. This is going to be my wide perspective of the ceremony, and this camera is going to be running the entire time. You want to have at least one camera running during the ceremony, so for whatever reason, if you missed someone entering into the ceremony, you still have that wide perspective capturing everyone making it into the ceremony. So it's always good to have a backup solution there. So then I have my groom cam with the 135, I have the backup solution with a 24 or 35, and then I have my handheld or roamer camera with a 50 mil. So if you had that 4th camera solution, you can set that up mirroring the groom reaction cam on the right side, just to have a safety angle of his reaction in the case that someone were to stand up during the groom reaction, which I have had happen before. So having a backup for your backup, it's never a bad thing to consider. So typically once the groom and the officiant make their way up through the ceremony, you want to make sure that you just run over real quick to your groom reaction cam and make sure that both the officiant and the groom are locked in focus, and in the frame. And the reason for this is because if you are solo, if the bride's walking up the aisle, you don't really have time to run over there during that moment to make sure they're locked in. And when the officiant begins his monologue, you're kind of still focused in on, dad giving her away, so you don't have time to run over there again and get that set because you don't want to cause any distractions. So just making sure that you have them in frame, making sure that you have them in the frame and locked in and focused is going to be really important. So to recap for the processional, I am stationed with a photographer in the front of the aisle with a handheld camera, usually a 50mm attached, capturing the bridal party, the groom, and the bride and dad entering the ceremony. And then I have a groom reaction cam on the left side with a 135 that has both the officiant and the groom in frame. And then I have a backup camera capturing a wide perspective of the entire processional, and this is set with a 24 or a 35mm.
All right, guys, that is the end of part 1 on how to film a wedding ceremony. Thank you so much for sticking around. Part 2 will be coming out next week, and it will focus on the ceremony and the recessional. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And if you like today's video, it will mean so much if you consider hitting that like button, subscribe, and leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you guys. Let me know if there's any parts of the wedding ceremony that you just seem to struggle with and need a bit more insight on. Either way, I'd love to hear from you guys. So until next time, keep creating and telling beautiful stories. Peace.